And you can see a full list of candidates standing in Thurrock on the BBC website. And the Conservative Andrew Rossendale is with us now. Welcome to the Daily Politics.
Hello.
Suzanne Evans, though, first of all, are you, UKIP, reducing the likelihood of an EU referendum after the election by taking votes from the Conservative Party?
No, absolutely not. I think we're increasing it. The more UKIP MEPs that you might laugh, Andrew, but the more UKIP MEPs we've got in the House of Commons,
MPs.
the more, MPs, the more we can hold Cameron's feet to the fire, so he actually does give us that referendum.
But only, of course, if David Cameron comes out forming the next government.
If you
deprive the Tories, surely, of as many as, I don't know, well, anything between 2 and 10 seats, then the likelihood of the Conservatives being in government is reduced.
Well, we're talking about Thurrock. If you vote Conservative in Thurrock, you're actually helping Ed Miliband's
we're talking generally here.
Candidate, because the Conservatives are an embarrassing third. You know, Labour's not going to give you a referendum, so they say. I think if we have enough UKIP MPs, he might very well change his mind. But certainly in terms of Cameron, we don't trust him. He's offered a referendum before. He offered a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty and then changed his mind.
Are you saying that if there is a Conservative government of any type, whether it's in coalition or majority or minority administration, that they will renege on their promise to hold an EU referendum?
David Cameron has always set himself up to renege on it from the word go by those very words. If I am Prime Minister of a majority government, that's his caveat, that's his get-out clause. He knows the Conservatives haven't had a majority for the last 23 years now, and they're not going to get one now. If they couldn't get one after Gordon Brown and his unpopular Labour government, they're certainly not going to win one. So that's always been Mr Cameron, Mr Europhile's get-out clause. What
do you say to that, Andrew? The Tories are going to renege on that promise?
This is just shockingly irresponsible.
We're
about to hand over, because of UKIP, power to Ed Miliband and Nicola Sturgeon, who will not give us a referendum. The only way to guarantee a referendum is to vote Conservative, to get a majority Conservative government. Are
you saying then without a majority Conservative government, the Conservatives will not be able to guarantee,
without
by the very nature,
326 MPs who will vote for a referendum? Of course, we can't get it through Parliament. I was one of those who rebelled against the Prime Minister. I rebelled because I wanted that referendum. I desperately want the British people to have the right to choose. But UKIP, I'm sorry to say, you are taking votes from us, and that will deliver a Labour government with no referendum.
Are you conceding you're going to lose this election?
I'm not conceding that at all. I think that UKIP voters are actually coming back to us. They're realising a nonsensical situation of voting for UKIP, who won't win hardly any seats, whilst denying us the majority that we need for that referendum.
This sense of entitlement that you get from the Conservatives is always astonishing. Our voters, our votes, you're taking from us. You know, your party's, I think, going to have a real shock come May the 7th. I think the Conservatives have been on the way out for quite some time. UKIP is taking votes from both left and right. We are increasingly getting Labour voters. In fact, just over the last month, I think our share of votes overall has gone up from 7% to 19%.
Suzanne, the people who are going to be shocked are the people who voted UKIP and realise that by doing so, they've put Ed and Nicola Sturgeon in charge of our country with no referendum on Europe.
First of all, you're making a massive assumption about Ed Miliband and Nicola Sturgeon. He is saying he won't go into coalition with her. I know she's absolutely desperate for it. But we also say, what is the difference? Does it really matter whether you've got Ed Miliband or David Cameron in Parliament? Because we're all controlled by the European Union now.
But that's interesting, because you say you could hold Ed Miliband's feet to the fire. Is there any evidence so far that Labour would change their minds on an EU referendum?
No, absolutely not. They're digging their heels in. The other question we have, I don't think either of them are going to get a majority in Parliament. They could both be gone. Who knows what might happen in their parties?
Right, so just to come back to you, do you accept that by splitting the Conservative vote in some constituencies, I take your point, you're not just going for Conservatives, but in some constituencies you clearly are, that you do run the risk of letting other parties through? You know,
it doesn't matter. UKIP voters, once you've made up your mind to vote UKIP, you generally actually stick with UKIP because
you recognise. Why don't you focus on Labour MPs that don't want a referendum? Why focus on loads of people like myself and others who have fought for years and years and years, long before UKIP existed, for that referendum, and to leave the political union, wasting your efforts fighting us whilst letting the Labour Party win the election?
Andrew, you need
it is totally irresponsible.
You need to think about
and I'm not sure the British people will forgive you.
You sound very worried, Andrew Rossendale.
I'm not worried about my constituency. I'm worried about people thinking that by voting UKIP they'll get a referendum when in fact the opposite is likely to happen.
What is it Douglas Carswell calls it? A pretend-a-rendum. Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless woke up and smelled the coffee. Maybe you should, as a good Eurosceptic too, Andrew, and come and join us.
I realise that the only way to deal with the issues this country faces and to give the British people the right to vote in a referendum is to have a majority Conservative government. Help us and pull back.
Going to happen.
Pull back from seats that you have no chance of winning.
Right.
And then we might get it.
Well,
Would you pull back, Suzanne Evans?
Well, would you like to pull back from Hayward and Middleton, say, so we have a chance of beating Labour there? Will you withdraw your Conservative
I'm not in a
candidate?
position to give that pledge, but I do think that UKIP, knowing that you cannot win many of these seats, but knowing that Labour is second challenger to us, you are irresponsibly helping them to win.
What about an agreement with UKIP? I mean, you may have to have some sort of deal, mightn't you, after polling day? If you need the numbers, would you talk to UKIP, if there are UKIP MPs, to join with you?
I think we should talk to anybody who is willing to do the right thing for this country, but we're not in that territory.
Who would that be?
We are in the territory of winning a majority, because that's the only secure way of making sure we get a referendum on Europe and can sort out the mess that we're in with the EU, which has developed over many years, and I want to change it.
What's wrong with waiting till 2017 for a referendum? I mean, Nigel Farage has already admitted it would take time anyway for negotiations to be done. What's wrong with waiting till then?
Well, we lose endlessly more powers, business gets disrupted, the sense of governments gets disrupted, democracy comes even further under the cosh of Brussels. I think we really just need to get it as soon as possible.
But Suzanne,
and
what if you lose it? What if you have a quick referendum and we have to stay in because we haven't actually given ourselves enough leeway to convince the middle-of-the-road people who just want trade and cooperation is what I want, what you want. We actually agree on this, don't we? So why don't we actually come up with a new plan to have trade and cooperation, have that referendum in a sensible period, and then we can get out of this political union which most of us disagree
Well, I
with.
wonder, Andrew, can I ask you, do you believe in this phony idea of being able to reform the European Union? Because that's the other issue, isn't it? I certainly do.
I just think we need a new relationship with Europe, and we need trade, we need cooperation, a sensible relationship with our neighbours. What's wrong with that?
Well, we can
Andrew
do that
Rossendale, thank you.
out of political
Thank you.
union.
There's a new Scottish poll just come out. Do you want to know about it?
Yes,
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Well, I'll tell you. It's by TNS, and it puts the SNP on 54%.
You mean they've gone up?
They've gone up, which they project, I'm taking this from the STV news website up in Glasgow, projecting that it would give the SNP 57 out of Scotland's 59 seats. There would be one Labour MP, one Lib Dem, and no Tories. So that's just based on one poll. It's not a poll of polls, but you couldn't say Labour's clawing its way back, could you?
No, I think it's going the wrong way.
That would
from Labour's
from this poll
perspective.
would suggest
And the
that.
Conservatives are clearly finished in Scotland.
Now, since Suzanne Evans is here, it seems almost rude not to look at how UKIP is faring in the polls. Our resident expert is Christian Fraser, and he's been crunching the numbers. Christian, over to you.
Joe, thank you very much. Yes, we had Suzanne up here the other day, actually, when we were looking at the poll of polls for the last 5 years. We sometimes forget, actually, how far they've come. 2010 down here on 3%, but fast forward 5 years, look how they climb up to this high point up here, October, November 2014, Clacton, Rochester and Strood. And then I was asking Suzanne whether this is a bit of a developing trend here, this sort of dip, and she said, no, absolutely not. We've got lots of shy UKIPers out there who are going to come out for us on polling day. Well, she might be right, because the latest Survation poll actually puts them on 18 rather than the 13% of the poll of polls, which is a good figure for UKIP. The difficulty, though, is in this chart. If I show you the spread of the various polling agencies, so you've got Ipsos Mori over here. These are over the last 2 weeks, by the way, but Ipsos Mori on 10% and Survation now on 18%. A spread of 8. One of these polling agencies is certainly going to be left red-faced at the end of the election.
I understand Nigel Farage was leading a sing-song in a Ramsgate restaurant last Thursday night. Why was he so happy?
I understand so, yes. He was in an Italian restaurant, wasn't he? Quite the crooner, I understand. What was he singing? New York, New York, and Hi-Ho Silver Lining. Yeah, some of my favourites too. Well, apparently he may have seen that Survation poll, but also the polling for Thanet South. Now, you'll see this is the 2010 picture. The Conservatives were a long way ahead. UKIP down here on a lowly 6%, but the polling from Survation in Thanet South suggests that Nigel Farage is now on 39%, 9 points ahead of his Conservative rivals. So that would certainly put him in good spirits. And I'm just going to look at where Ellie was in Thurrock. This was a tight one last time. In fact, the Conservatives nicked it from Labour by 92 votes. Again, UKIP down on 7%. But there's an Ashcroft poll suggests they're taking votes from Conservative and Labour, and they're now on 35%, pushing the Conservatives into third place. And I know that Suzanne is saying that they take votes from Labour as well, but we've seen research which suggests that they have 40%. 40% of their support are people who voted for the Conservatives in 2010. So they do affect the Conservatives disproportionately.
Right, well, let's stick with the issue of Labour support as far as UKIP is concerned. What about some Labour seats in the north? Are UKIP going after those?
They are, because they've got a bit more dosh to do it. Richmond Desmond, of course, owner of Express Newspapers, has given them an extra £1 million. So Great Grimsby, for instance, would be one where they would campaign that much harder. I mean, Suzanne was talking about Haywood and Middleton. I was up there last year, and there were some people locally thought they should have thrown more at Haywood and Middleton and could have taken more off Labour. Well, they won't make the same mistake here in Great Grimsby. And the reason that they think they're doing so well is because of the local elections. They took 4 seats, I think, off Labour in the local elections, so plenty of optimism here as well. I think if they took Great Grimsby, Joe, Thurrock and Thanet South and held on to Clacton and Haywood and Middleton, 5 seats would be seen generally as a fairly good performance, but I'm sure that Suzanne is going to disagree with me.
Christian Fraser, thank you.
So would 5 seats be a good performance?
Yes, I think it would. I'd prefer a few more than that, obviously, and I think there will be some surprises. I think we can get more than that. We're targeting about 10, and we aim to win every one. But look at, I mean, it's just staggering, isn't it? The difference now in percentages from 2010. There's no doubt that UKIP support has encroached massively into both of the other main parties. And what I find also interesting is you look at our electoral history, we've always outpolled the polls. So I think, although you can argue about which poll is the most accurate, and as Christian said, one will end up being red-faced after the election. I hope it's not the Salvation one. Then I think we will actually do better.
Well, let's do the poll of polls, though, because that shows you in decline. Before Christmas, you were on 19%. On the poll of polls, you're now down to 13%. You couldn't exactly say that this UKIP campaign was on fire.
Well, I think we have been, actually, since our manifesto launch, there's definitely been a greater sense of support for us on the street.
Poll of polls doesn't show that.
Reporting that. Well, you never know who actually the pollsters actually talk to, what questions they ask, so on and so forth. I think we're going to do very well. I think we are here to stay. It's definitely the era now of 3, if not 4 party politics.
Is there not a danger for you, rather than outpolling the polls on the day, that a number of Tory defectors to you will think, particularly if it looks like Mr Miliband is going to be the next Prime Minister, that they'll say, hey, we're going back to the Tories to stop that from happening? Well, that has to be a risk to you.
I think this is a problem, really, that you tend to have the polls being used as a political tool of propaganda, and I think that is really unfortunate. And I've always said,
the way it is.
You should vote for who you think will do the best job. And we've certainly done polling ourselves, or surveys in the past, which show that if everybody who wanted to vote UKIP actually did vote UKIP, we could potentially be the opposition.
But you know that's not going to happen.
We know that's not going to happen.
Just checking.
Although I also
just
say,
checking that you did know that's not going to happen, unless you were on.
As I say, 5 UKIP
funny.
MPs, I think, in the House of Commons, and you look at we just get Nigel Farage in. The way he has shaken up the European Parliament. Imagine him doing that in the House of Commons. It will be amazing.
And when Diane Abbott said on This Week on BBC One on Thursday night that she thought Nigel Farage was going to lose, did that clinch it in your mind that he was almost certainly going to win?
Yes, it did, actually. But of course, I also hadn't seen the poll that had just come out, putting him 9 points ahead. I think I saw it when I got home after that programme.
If you have about 5 MPs in the end, do you really have any power?
I think we do. Arguably, you could say we don't have much power and influence in the, well, we have practically no power and influence in the European Parliament. We have certainly made a difference. Look at what we've already done in terms of government. We've forced David Cameron to at least put his promise of an EU referendum on the table. You didn't
force Labour. At one stage you used to tell me that Labour would have a referendum too, and that hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened yet. We've had all sorts. I mean, even the BBC TV licence, I think UKIP was the first party that suggested it was maybe too high and might need to be reviewed. The other parties have gone that route now. We certainly said it should be criminalised. All the other parties. It's amazing how many of our policies get nicked. So I don't want to be distracted and diverted by the TV licence fee, but it's just one idea.
Mind you, the Monster Raving Loony Party said that the
blue
main parties
number.
pitched their policies.
It's not a very good idea. All right. Joe.
Yeah. You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.